Do you have too much money? Do you want to have less of it? Well then, boy, do I ever have the car for you. Let me introduce you to the 1989 to 2002 Nissan Skylines, the R32, 33, and 34 generations. These cars will drain your bank account faster than that bottle service girl you met at Live in Miami that you swear loves you for you.
I love you.
Many of us who grew up during the 90s and early 2000s dreamed not of owning a Ferrari or Lamborghini or 911, but rather of a Skyline GTR. And so when they became available to us freedom lovers here in the US of A, back in 2014, we all had to have one. But with that massive demand for these cars came its own set of problems, which I am going to tell you all about right after I tell you to like the video, drop a comment with what car we should do next, and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to put out a video every single day, so your suggestions really help us. If you have a Skyline or any other car, be sure to upload it to our vehicle gallery to help others dial in their fitment. Now, let's get back into the problems with owning a Skyline. So back in 2014, 10 years ago, these cars became legal to own in the US because apparently when a car becomes 25 years old, the American government decides that your safety in that vehicle is no longer their concern, and therefore gives you the green light to drive it on public roads. So 2014 rolls around and we've all got our credit cards out and at the ready to buy the first Skyline that we come across. But then the bad news starts coming in. Unscrupulous dealers taking deposits on cars and never shipping them. Awful misrepresentation of the condition of these cars, rust is to a minimal if you know you know. And that's all on top of these cars really just being 25-year-old Japanese rust buckets in and of themselves. But Jake, I clicked on this video because it said why you should buy a Skyline. Well, I'm getting to that. Bear with me here.
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
But it's important to understand that many of these cars really are a don't meet your heroes type of situation. They're expensive, parts are expensive, they're generally in pretty rough shape, and you're gonna need to either buy a very expensive example or set aside the cost of the car in maintenance and modifications to get your Skyline to be a usable, reliable vehicle. Now, something else to note here is that in Japan, Skylines other than the GTR trims are just regular ass traffic. A non-turbo four-door Skyline is literally a taxi, like a Crown Vic. They're nothing special, so your expectations of the quality of car you are buying need to be metered as such. Now that I've ripped that band-aid off for you, let's get into why you should buy one. Well, so you've decided to take the plunge into Skyline ownership. Awesome, congratulations. You're gonna have a few choices to begin with, and they're all largely dictated by your budget and goals. Now, first you need to pick a generation. They all have their pros and cons, so let's get into that. First up, the R32, the best generation by a mile, and that's not just because the guy writing the script and filming the video happens to own one. The R32 encompasses the 1989 to 1994 Skylines and is the first generation of the modern Skylines. The 32 is generally going to be your most stripped down, basic Skyline. It's not going to have much more than seats, a steering wheel, and a dashboard. For someone who wants the bare bones and nothing more, the 32 is your best choice. These cars have everything you need and nothing you don't. They're also the lightest of the Skyline chassis, which, if you want to go fast, might mean they're a good option for you. Now, these tend to be the least expensive, so if budget is your jam, then the 32 might be the right call. Now, cons are obvious here. They're built out of recycled soda cans, hopes, and dreams. They're 30 plus years old, so rust is usually pretty bad on them. All Skylines rust, but 32s are especially gnarly. The non-GTR cars either get an RB20E or RB20DET, both of which are pretty lackluster engines, and the early 32 GTRs have the short crank RB26, which can cause issues with the oil pump. We can't make this entire video about the differences between the RB engines or even the 26 engines because that's a video in and of itself, but there are a ton of videos out there, and I would check out Motive Garage, which delve directly into the differences between these generations of engines. 32 prices have pretty much settled as they're far from the new kid on the block. Expect to spend anywhere from around $8,000 for a four-door automatic NA, worst example, lowest trim, up to about $65,000 for a mint GTR. Now next you have the aircraft carrier generation, the absolute boat that is the R33. The 33 was built from 95 to 98, a comparatively short run to the 32. 33 owners get a lot of shit because they bought the heaviest Skyline, while simultaneously being the middle child. The 32 is the rowdy lightweight race car, the 34 is the cream of the crop bedroom wall poster, and the 33 is just kinda there in the middle. Still, if you like the body style, despite these being the red-headed stepchild of the Skyline world, these are awesome cars and can be a better value than the 32s or 34s. The 33 generation also has the rarest GTR model as part of its lineage, the Skyline GTR 400R, which in and of itself is very cool. Our 33 prices are similar to 32 as much of the novelty's worn off, with the 33 becoming legal in early 2020, a bit over 4 years ago at the time of recording this video. Pros on these are exactly what you'd expect. They are the least desirable generation, so prices are relatively low outside of standout models. They came with better engines than the 32, the RB25E and DET in the GTS-T, and the second-ish generation of the RB26 and the GTR. The interior is a real car that you can actually drive and has all the creature comforts you want. Cons, they're heavy and they're kind of known for that. If you're treating your Skyline purchase as an investment, it's also pretty safe to say that outside of a 400R or a mid GTR, the 33 isn't going to have the strongest price appreciation. Now last up you have the 34, the car that everyone under the age of 16 thinks is the fastest thing to ever exist, thanks Fast and Furious for that one, and the car that everyone over the age of 25 wishes was never in a movie because they will realistically never own one as a result. Being built for just 3 years from 99 to 02, the 34 was the pinnacle of the RB-powered Skylines, taking advantage of Nissan's decade of experience building these cars. The 34s have a boxier silhouette than their earlier cousins, but leverage that to fit wide fenders that you can stuff some big-ass wheels into and move away from the rounded headlights to assume a more rectangular, angry shape. The rear end remains the same as other Skylines with the iconic 4-round taillights, but the 34 rear is arguably the most iconic of them all. Pros are pretty simple here. The most years of development equates to the best car. The 34s get the most developed engines, with the GTR being a specific standout, as it gets an upgraded 6-speed Getrag manual transmission as well as upgraded turbos. The downsides here are simple as well. They are expensive. They cost a lot of American dollars. The 34 is iconic and shiny and new, so you can assume that you're paying a bit of a hype premium or GTR tax on these. Each model costs roughly double what a comparable model from the previous generation cost. Also, they're kinda heavy, but they are newer cars, so that's to be expected, more safety features and all that jazz. Now on to the specific models of Skyline. They take a lot of different names throughout the years, but you basically have 3 trims in each Skyline generation: base rear-wheel drive non-turbo, mid-range rear-wheel drive turbo, and GTR, which is all-wheel drive twin turbo. Each option has its own pros and cons, except for the base that's just the Cope Skyline to say you want a Skyline. Now if you want one for some reason, are non-turbo, usually automatic and painfully slow. These cars are essentially the Japanese equivalent of like a Crown Vic or Chevy Malibu. They're powered by a naturally aspirated RB20, RB25, or RB25 Neo, depending on the generation, 32, 33, and 34 respectively. They make around 140 horsepower, thereabouts. I couldn't really be bothered to Google it for the purpose of the video because genuinely no one has ever cared about the horsepower of an NA Skyline. They do come rear-wheel drive, which is a plus, and in my eyes, if you're looking for a swap candidate, instead of being stupid like me and ripping the 26 out of your GTR, they're good for that. R34 Skylines are also awesome dailies. They're new enough to have a lot of creature comforts, working AC, radio, all that stuff, but not so new that they have new car nannies, and if you can get one cheap enough, you'll probably enjoy it. Pay 5 to 12 grand for one of these and not a penny more. If you get one of these Skylines, don't be that guy posting about his huge plans for the car. Just enjoy what you bought and either have another engine sitting on the shelf ready to go, which will cost you more than a GTS-T, or just enjoy driving it and then trade up to a better Skyline at a later date. You can still make these things look pretty cool though. Wheels, suspension, and aero generally all fit the same way they do on the other narrow body Skylines, so you can definitely throw a nice looking wheel and tire setup on there, lower it, and have a car that's fun enough to drive, looks cool, and impresses the kids at your local Friday night Sonic meet. Now getting into the Skylines that are more interesting, the mid-range turbo models. These are called GTS-T or similar, and you guessed it, the T stands for turbo. They come with an RB20, RB25, or RB25 Neo, 32, 33, and 34 respectively, and make around 250 horsepower. They were available manual or automatic and were all rear-wheel drive with the exception of the GTS-4s. The RB20 is a pretty lackluster engine, so we'd steer you away from the 32 GTS-T cars, but the RB25 is very fundamentally similar to the RB26, so the RB25 powered cars can be a great way to get into a cost-effective GTR-ish car. You are lacking the all-wheel drive system, but if you're into drifting, that might be a net positive for you. Otherwise, these generally come with a 5-speed manual transmission, limited slip differential, and are a blast to drive. You can expect to pay in the high teens for a 32, high 20s for a 33, and around 50 for a 34. I don't like the 34 price either, but that's the way supply and demand works. Go back to high school econ if you don't understand it. There's a graph that looks like this. The turbo cars are very tunable, and the RB25 is a pretty stout motor, being able to hold around 500 at the tires with a relatively unopened motor. You will, at minimum, want to refresh it and throw an oil pump in there to combat the oiling issues these cars have, but once that's done, a turbo upgrade and supporting modifications paired up with a Haltech ECU, and you're off to the races. Now, as far as wheels and tires, they are a must on these cars. The stock running gear is 16-inch on most of them and is pretty awful looking. Most Skyline owners run 17s or 18s, and that's the direction I would steer you as well. Bear in mind these are the narrow body cars, so you don't get the cool GTR sizing, but you can fit a lot of decent sized wheels anyway. Now, a lot of other Nissan components bolt right up, so you can upgrade braking components with GTR or Z33 parts, which are a must if you upgrade power. Now, last up, the GTRs. No, not every Skyline's a GTR. TikTok kids, we're talking to you. The GTRs are the best of the best, the cream of the crop. All 3 generations are powered by the RB26 twin turbo engine and are backed up by a 5-speed or 6-speed manual transmission. Power is sent to all 4 wheels through the advanced Atessa all-wheel drive system, which had torque vectoring in the early 90s. Absolutely insane. The RB26 was limited by the Japanese gentleman's agreement, limiting all cars made in Japan to 276 horsepower, but this was a very healthy 276 horsepower, with some of these cars actually dynoing at that power number at the wheels in stock trim. The RB26 remains largely the same through the 3 generations, receiving minor upgrades to internals and oiling systems, as it does have oiling issues. The 34 RB26 receives upgraded turbos, which do allow it to make more power, but everyone with a 26 throws the stock twins in the garbage and puts a big single on anyway, so ultimately this really may not matter that much to you. The 32 and 33 get a 5-speed manual, while the 34 gets a much stronger 6-speed Getrag manual, which is good for holding a lot more power. Now, price-wise, these do cost an arm and a leg. There's no way around it. They're Japanese classic cars. 32s and 33s are in the $60,000 to $75,000 range, barring examples like Nismo V-Spec cars and the 400R. The 34s haven't really found a price floor yet, with most trading hands in the low 6-figure range, around $120 to $150. Now, there are limited production models like the V-Spec 2 NER and 400R that can fetch some serious coin, but if you're in the market for $1 million Skyline, you're probably not watching this video, so we can generally exclude them. Power does come easily on these cars. Ditch the stock twins for a big single, and the 26's bottom end can hold pretty much whatever you want to throw at it. The real stock bottom end is very highly debated, but there are plenty of 600 all-wheel horsepower cars running around out there. I myself made in the mid-500s, and the car handled it beautifully. I'd be pretty confident in saying you could handle about the same as well. They will need some odds and ends depending on what you want to do to the car. Oiling is a significant issue, especially on the short crank cars, but an upgraded oil pump, a head drain, and restrictors, as well as other components that your tuner can explain to you, can solve that. Head studs also keep from lifting the head when forcing a lot of air into your 26 and are almost mandatory. Upgrade your twins to a single turbo, as the twins do have issues, and add fueling to match. Switch the stock ECU out for a Haltech and upgrade supporting components like clutch, intercooler, etc. as needed, and you've got a 600-ish horsepower all-wheel drive GTR. The factory suspension is good, but probably worn out 30 years later, and you will want to swap over to a nice set of coilovers like BC Racing or Silvers, and for wheels and tires, you probably already have TE37s on the way if you're watching this video, but if not, we recommend an 18x9.5 plus 18 for the 32 and 33, and an 18x10.5 plus 22 for the 34, as they are factory wide-body cars. So bringing it all back together, in my opinion, should you buy a Skyline? Well, I think so, yeah. They're iconic pieces of Japanese automotive history, and they ain't making any more of them. The prices seem to generally trend upwards, so I think that now is as good a time as any to get into one. Just budget accordingly for maintenance and modifications, and you'll have a great time with the car. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked the video, please click the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you own a Skyline or want to own one, drop a comment down below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.